So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success story series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their successes, their backgrounds, the challenges they've had, and what really drives them forward. And today I'm delighted to have with us Andy Elliott, who's sports media and communication specialist at Acuity. So Andy, firstly, thank you for coming on board. But secondly, if you'd like to introduce yourself and Acuity and what you do and how you help your clients.
Yeah, sure. Well, Acuity is it's a slightly strange business, but in the end, it's all about sport, as the name suggests. We're part consultancy and part provider of content to people who want it. And when we talk about sport, it's not what happens on the pitch or on the tennis court. It's about what happens off the pitch and in the business of sport. So on the consultancy side, we help businesses varying from the people who run the sports, the governing bodies, through to the media companies who report on it, through to the betting companies who bet on it. We help all those businesses either get into a particular sport, understand the sport, exploit the data that they may possess, grow their audience, and in the case of some of the governing bodies and media companies, get into betting as well. So it's a fairly broad brush, but Acuity brings together the expertise of the three founders, myself, another guy called Chris Buckley, another guy called Graham Shaw. We're all journalists by trade. We all started on local newspapers and then moved into various areas. We all benefited from the internet boom and the bust. Chris and I both worked in regional papers. I moved on to the Daily Express for 10 years, had a spell on the Sun, always in sport, and enjoyed that side of the business. Enjoyed running a sports desk, reporting on everything that was happening, and then got an opportunity to move to a company called the Press Association, which is the national news agency for the UK. And at the time, Chris moved there as well, exactly at the same time. I went as sports editor, he went as general manager. And we were very lucky in that two things really. PA in those days was the source of information. So breaking news largely came via PA.
Right.
So if the England football team was named, it was given to PA first. It was distributed to all their customers at the same time. And if there's a news flash on TV, it came from PA. If there was a football score, it came from PA. If there's a cricket score, it came from PA. So it was a very, very integral business to the world of media. And it was owned, it was and still is owned by media companies. When the internet came along at the same time, PA blossomed because it had a comprehensive source of information and it had it instantly, which was perfect for the internet and for 24-hour news.
Yes.
So we were able to build a business very, very quickly on the back of a reputation for being comprehensive and fast and accurate. And in sport particularly, we were at the time when sport began to become front page news and not just back page news. And it began to become really important to not just football fans, but to businesses, sponsors, brands, and bookmakers.
Yes.
So suddenly we're in the middle of a perfect storm where we had the information, we had great relationships because of who we were, and we had customers who were crying out for it. So we were able to build a sports business which wasn't just the UK, but went beyond the UK. We had offices in Asia, Australia, South Africa, North America, and we built a global sports business, which was just phenomenal. Nobody really, if you asked us how we did it, I'm sure we'd go, we're not sure, because it just happened. And none of us on the sports desk or the sports business were particularly commercial people. We just kind of rode the wave, really.
Yeah.
And in a way, it was alien to PA because PA, as I say, is owned by UK media companies, and it's a news agency.
Yeah.
But as I say, the business got very, very big. We built up relationships with governing bodies around the world. We were the Premier League's first data partner. We were integral to British horse racing. We had relationships with the NBA and MLB in America, Aussie Rules, South African Premier League. And all those relationships just added to what we'd got in terms of content and knowledge and experience. When we hit 2008 and the recession started to bite, and the owners of the parent company, PA, thought it was probably best to try and sell the business, to sell the sports business.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it wasn't really the right time. The downturn was coming.
Yeah.
And, you know, things were changing in the world. People weren't investing. And we didn't have the resource to build the business any further and sustain it. And in the end, it all just began to fall apart, really. Chris and I left, a few other people left, PA went in a different direction. So Chris and I were kind of left, what do we do now? And we both went off and did consultancy, did various things. And then we started a company about 2011, 12, called The Content Factory, which was, the idea was that we, as it said, we would supply content to people, which we did. We began to, you know, do what we'd always done in the past, supply content. We had 2 or 3 journalists working with us. And that kind of bumbled along a bit, but Chris and I always did different things as well. He was doing other things, I was doing other things. I started doing some consultancy work with UEFA as their media man in the UK, and it's something that I still do.
Right.
And then kind of a few years later, we thought, well, where are we going to go with this? You know, we either do something with it or we just roll it up. And we met up with Graham and another guy, Andy Roberts, and they had a strong digital background.
Right.
Andy came from marketing. Graham again came from journalism. And Andy's no longer with us, but Graham is still with us, and he gave us that bit of digital knowledge which we didn't have. And then so we changed the name, Sport Acuity. We invested. We put a bit more resource into it. We didn't put huge investment into it, and we created what it is now, which is a consultancy and a content provider.
Yeah.
And it's been a bumpy ride because of the pandemic.
Yes.
And the pandemic kind of taught us 2 things. One, hold your nerve. And the second was, if you can diversify, but keep it within your parameters. We lost 4 contracts at the start of the pandemic.
Right.
Literally overnight, because people didn't want content.
Yeah.
They said, well, you know, the events are not happening.
Yeah.
Euro 2020 was one of them.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And it just suddenly stopped.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, well, we hung in and we carried on going, and the business began to pick up again towards the end of the first year of the pandemic. But we also thought that maybe we ought to be a bit more in charge of our own destiny and set up our own platform. And, you know, we had no idea what sport to pick. Yeah. We thought about boxing, we thought about Formula 1, we thought about football. But by chance, we were able to acquire 2 websites, one in the triathlon space and one in running.
Right.
Both under the same umbrella. One's called Try 247, one's called Run 247. And they're, as they say, they're there to supply information to those communities. And we went from a standing start knowing very little about publishing to rapidly growing the audience and building the advertising base. We brought in an editor-in-chief at the start of the year. We've got 2 full-time journalists on it. We've got 2 full-time salespeople on it, but it's going well. It's going well. We've learned a hell of a lot about growing a digital business as well.
Wow.
And that learning is that we've taken some of that learning into our consultancy with other clients as well.
Yes.
So
Fantastic.
it's broadened the business. The consultancy side of it is really important to us because that's all about network. It's all about the people we've got to know over the years and the knowledge we've acquired. The content usually comes out of that, where people need, they need some substance to go with what we've suggested. And the websites give us something that gives us a bit more control over what we're doing. So
yeah.
And also being a service business, if you ever do think you want to grow the value in it, if you ever do think you want to kind of sell it in the future, you've really only got your customers and the people who run it. Whereas if we actually own something as well, then it does give us a bit more substance. So that's where we are, really. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that's a very quick potted
brilliant
potted history of how we got where we are.
And when you're growing up, was this area something you always wanted to be in?
Well, I was always into sport, and I was always into newspapers. I loved newspapers.
Yeah.
As a young teenager, I always read the Daily Mirror. My dad always bought the Daily Express. And I kind of thought, I want to do something around writing, journalism, but careers teachers pushed me away from that. Did my A-levels, thought I was going to go to university and do a biology degree. The A-levels didn't quite work out. My dad thrust an advert in the local paper under my nose that said, "Do you want to be a reporter?"
Oh, wow.
And I applied for a journalism course, got on the course, and yeah, it kind of changed my life, really. So
brilliant. So fast. I was just thinking about the last few years. You obviously talked about some of the issues. What would be the biggest issues you've overcome over the last sort of 5-10 years?
Well, I mean, career-wise, the biggest, personally, the biggest thing, and business-wise, is redundancy. And I think lots of people, I mean, God, it used to be a dirty word when I started work, but redundancy now is a fact of life.
Yes.
And I've been made redundant twice. Once at the Daily Express, been there 10 or 11 years. They wanted to merge the daily title and the Sunday title and, rearrange everything.
Yeah.
But actually they didn't want me to go. I wanted to go. So that was my choice. I got, Fleet Street in those days was, there were lots of vacancies and lots of opportunities, and I walked into another job a day later. So that wasn't a big issue. When I was made redundant at PA, that was a big issue because that had become my life. It become something I identified with, and I think probably too much when you identify yourself by your job. And I think we've probably all experienced that at some point in our lives. And also when you're with a company a long time, you almost become institutionalized.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite like leaving prison, but it's when it's the next day when you realize, oh, I haven't got a mobile phone, I haven't got a car, I haven't got IT to ring. Who does the accounts? How do I get an email address? All that kind of stuff, which sounds very, very kind of basic, but I think, as you'll testify, when you work for a company, all that stuff's there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's starting your own business as you've done is such a challenge because it's all down to us to start with. It's like we always joke the organizational chart in a new business is me. If you're lucky, it's me and you. And that's everything else comes under there. So what are some of the biggest sort of learnings you've found in business and potentially in life through this
Well,
approach?
I think going back to when I left the job at PA and went and I set up on my own, basically, the biggest learnings are just knowing people. Well, two things really: knowing people and discovering what you know. Network is absolutely vital, and I just went and met loads of people.
Yep.
And there was never a time I thought this is a waste, because
Yeah.
but even now, if people want to meet me, I always meet them, because I think, well, that might be helping them, but also it's never a waste of time to meet anybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's never a waste of time to talk to anybody about anything, because you'll learn something.
Absolutely.
Even if you learn, I don't need to know anything about that. You know, you'll have learned something. But the other thing is that when you go through your life and your career, you build up a hell of a lot of knowledge and skills, but you don't always realize it.
Yeah.
You know, and
Definitely.
I guess it probably comes back to what you do, you know, in your job. It's coaching it out of people. And when I've talked to friends in the last few years who've been made redundant, I've always said the biggest challenge is you don't know what you know. You don't realize all that knowledge and experience you've got and the skills you've got. And unless you've got fantastic self-belief, which not many people do have, it's really difficult to kind of channel all that experience, all that knowledge, and say, okay, I'm going to use that to this end, you know, because there'll be things you've done in your life that you've forgotten, but you just take for granted.
Absolutely.
One of the basic things is, my wife always says to me, oh, you've got a great way with words, you know. So if you write a birthday card or you write a letter, an email to somebody, I'll just bash it out. And she says, how do you do that? I said, well, I just do it. It's what I've been doing for 40 years, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't realize those skills sometimes. You just take it for granted. And I think that's true in any walk of life, in any business. You build up skills you don't realize you've got.
That makes perfect sense. So almost an asset register of the things I do know and I can do is always very valuable, especially in this changing world, Andy. With, as you say, that people are moving roles all the time and having to often, and it's being able to value ourselves is really key. But as you mentioned, we're a coaching organisation, and I'm keen, especially in the world of sport. But who's been the best coach you've ever had, and what made them that?
What, in business?
Yeah, in any form of life.
I mean, I've had some strange bosses. I seem to have picked up strange bosses along the way. And they've all taught me something. I mean, and I've learned a lot from one or two of them. I mean, I had a boss, I worked on a newspaper which is no longer around, called the Sheffield Morning Telegraph.
Right, yeah.
And my boss was called Benny Hill. And so people of a certain generation, Benny Hill means something else. But he was a lot funnier, and he treated us all like his children,
right,
and like his project. And all the people that I worked with at the time, we all learned so much from him, journalistically.
Yep.
And you know, he probably made me the journalist that I became, and I learned a hell of a lot. And I did well as a journalist. You know, became, you know, deputy sports editor at Express and sports editor at PA, and I did very well. When it came to business and actually, you know, going beyond just the kind of content side of things, then my business partner, Chris Buckley, is somebody I learned a hell of a lot from. Because Chris was nominally my boss. He was general manager of the sports business. Cool. But we're both similar age, similar experience, similar outlook on life. And I've learned a hell of a lot from him, and still do. We still kind of bounce off each other and work together well. We know each other well. So yeah.
Brilliant. And have you picked up any favourite quotes or sayings that you fall back on in good or bad times?
Well, what I can say publicly.
Well, yeah.
Not particularly. I mean, there are things I say which I probably, you know, don't even know I'm saying.
Yes.
I mean, there is that one about you don't know what you know, and
Yeah,
I think that is very, very valid.
yeah.
And I think as well, no meeting is ever wasted.
I like that one. I think that's bang on.
Because talk to everybody, you know, just,
yeah.
And I say I've had mates who've been made redundant recently. I've said to them, just keep talking to people. Don't stay at home, or don't not ring people. Just keep talking to people, because something will come up. Somebody will go, oh, I know, I can help you with that.
Yep.
Yeah. And network is hugely important in your own business, because I would say us as a business, as Sport Acuity, nearly all our businesses come through people we know.
Great.
We don't, we're largely a B2B business.
Yeah.
Outside of the websites, and so we don't advertise. We don't, we don't have a massive marketing budget. It's pointless.
Yeah.
So nearly all of our business has come through people we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were on a call the other day with an American company, and the reason we were doing some work with them is because it was a guy who's English, Scouser.
Yep.
We worked with him 15 years ago. We've kind of kept in touch. He remembered what we were doing. He said, I'm doing some work for this American company. I think you'd be really good for them. And that's how it's built up. So
yeah, brilliant. I totally agree. I mean, you just never know where things go, and it's that openness, isn't it, that's really valuable. So what would you say you've learned about yourself in your journey?
Gosh, a hell of a lot, I suppose. I think going back to that thing about, when you change roles, or when you're looking to change roles, as I say, people often come across as really confident. Over the years, I could count on the fingers of one hand people who are really, really confident and really believe what they're saying. You get people who really believe what they're saying, but they're not that good. So there are very few people who are really, really confident, really believe what they're saying, and they are really good. And I think confidence is one of those things that it's a fine balancing act. You've got to believe in yourself, and that's not always easy. And that, for me, it's come with age. It's not. I wish I'd had that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I wish I had another 20 years so I could put it into practice.
I'm sure there's plenty left. I'm sure there's. Speaking of the future, what does the future look like, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
Well, as I say, Sport Acuity has got a really good base. We are in a really good position.
Right.
We have yet to seek outside investment. So we've never gone and said, give us $500,000, we could really do a lot with it. With us taking the 2 websites on, and the business itself, Sport Acuity, beginning to really kind of show signs of traction. The next year or two, I think we'll decide whether to really go for it, or whether we just continue with organic growth and see where it gets us.
Right.
And the one will drive the other, because having the 2 websites will kind of inform what we do on the other side of the business, and vice versa, because they can't really exist without each other. Sport Acuity journalists, me, Chris, Graham, we work on the websites as well, and we need the websites to grow to help Sport Acuity grow, and vice versa. So and the learnings we get from the websites will help us on the Sport Acuity side. So.
Yeah, brilliant. I
mean, the hope is the next couple of years we see growth on both sides. And then we'll see where we go after that.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I wish you very best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And to just a few little things to wrap up, I'm interested to know what you would say to anyone thinking of going into business right now.
I'd say give it a go. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid to do what you believe in, you know.
Yep.
I mean, we all know these stories of risk takers and people who bet the mortgage on stuff and blah blah blah. Though I think those people are very few and far between, and there are a lot of people who bet the mortgage and lost their mortgage as well.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say to anybody, go all in, you know, risk everything. You know,
Yep.
if you're a single person with no cares in the world, well, it's different. But if you've got family, house, kids, whatever, it's different. But equally, don't be so wary of not doing it, because you'll kick yourself.
Yes.
You know, if the worst that can happen is if it doesn't, you fail and you have to go back to work with somebody else, then why not? Why not give it a go? You know.
Absolutely. No, sound advice is that it's there are many people, unfortunately, that never do, you know, actually get to that point of pressing the button.
Yeah.
And it is a shame, because as
You
you
have
say,
to measure the risk, don't you? But yeah.
Absolutely, but absolutely, but you know, the risks can be mitigated, and as you say, especially at the right time. So, if you started your business again, what would you do differently, if anything?
Well, when we started the Content Factory, and Chris and I were doing consultancy as well. We didn't just focus on sport, which was crazy when you think about it, because sport was all we knew, and sport was all we knew best. And we got distracted by a lot of non-sport stuff. And, you know, going back to what you said about what advice I'd give somebody is, you know, keep to what you know. You know, don't start a coffee shop if all you've ever done is sold vegetables. You know, it's you know, stick to what you know, really, and focus on that, but also give it everything. You know, we could have, when we started the Content Factory, we probably could have given it a lot more time, but there was always that kind of like, well, we still need to earn a living doing these other things. So it is sometimes a question of focus and giving it full attention.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And finally, if you could, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old you?
Don't be afraid. Just give it a go. You know.
Brilliant.
I mean, I did. Looking back, I think, well, I made some big decisions, but sometimes I was kind of pushed into it, or it happened, or whatever. You know. I remember moving to London in the mid to late 80s. And London was like a different country. And I was kind of forced into it. I'm so glad I did it.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I'd just say, don't be afraid, just give it a go.
Brilliant. Great thoughts. Well, Andy, thank you so much. That's been really fascinating. It's really interesting to see again a different part of you know, business, a different part of as you say, content creation, journalism, and that whole career is really fascinating. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And
you're welcome.
Have you any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, it is good to learn about other businesses.
Yes.
You know, I think having worked in journalism and media, it can be like a lot of businesses, you get quite cloistered. And moving out of that mainstream enabled me and us to learn about different businesses and the way people do things. So I find all this fascinating.
It's a really good point. I mean, I often say to people that, you know, what we often find in what we do is businesses are started by people that are good at what they do. They're not necessarily good at running businesses at what they do, and there is quite a big difference. And it's accepting and understanding that. So getting the knowledge from other businesses and other people is really quite a valuable thing to do over time. Yeah. So well, thank you so much, and it'd be great to see you back, and good luck with you know, the next couple of years and the thought process of that exponential growth, and maybe we can circle back in a couple of years and see what you've decided.
Okay, you're welcome. All right,
thank you, Andy.
All the best. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.